Welcome to the Rauta, welcome to Inferno 2024. After 4 days of maniac, magical things we have had here, it's time for one more interview on the 5th day of, our existence in Oslo. Finally, sun coming in, everybody's super tired and all, except us. And this time it's something special from UK scene. UK scene being not that big in terms of black metal and all, but let me tell you, these guys are fantastic. They play good music, so it's time to keep a little bit of a British thing to come online. So let's welcome these guys. Sir, welcome to Rauta. Please state your name and status.
I'm Simon. I'm the drummer.
You, sir?
Hi, I'm Chris. I play the guitar and I sing in Winterfylleth.
And you, sir?
I'm Ross, lead guitar at Winterfylleth.
All right. Now, with the introduction done, let's start with the very basic thing, because we never assume there are always people who know everything about everything. How would you describe your music beyond just being British black metal?
Okay. I think the theme of Winterfylleth, I guess the ambition of when we started the band was to make atmospheric music that was based around black metal. But at the time that we were starting the band, we were, 20, 22 years old or something like that. A few of us had been involved in kind of doom metal and death metal and things before that. And we really kind of came to black metal a little bit later on and then kind of made a band about that. But because we were from the UK and because black metal from the UK wasn't a huge thing at the time, when we formed, the only real black metal bands from the UK were bands like Cradle of Filth and Hecate Enthroned and bands that were more like Scandinavian bands from the UK probably. I don't think there was ever really a UK British black metal identity in a meaningful way. So we wanted to make black metal, but have a slightly different twist on it. So we wanted it to be atmospheric and evocative and organic, and based more around the sort of themes and culture of the British Isles and our own personal history. Because I think a lot of the early black metal was based on, Scandinavian Norse history and some of the kind of themes that they were talking about. So we opted to not go down the kind of spikes and bullet belts and corpse paint route and be a bit more sort of set back as people and try and have the music and the atmosphere of the songs and the lighting sort of do the talking. So I think when people first saw us, I didn't think they understood that we were, a black metal band in that sense, but we've always tried to make, emotional, atmospheric music that draws on those themes of black metal, but has our own lens on it, if you like.
Now, coming back to that and expand a little bit, it's kind of weird that British Isles is known for being very kind of bleak and rainy and all that stuff. There's a lot of Gothic history and all that stuff and bloody vengeance and with the wars, kingdoms, shit and all that stuff. And of course you have doom metal about it. There's plenty of doom and doom death with bands like My Dying Bride, etc. And there are lots of good death metal coming from UK, even grind and all that stuff. But black metal has always been a little bit, like I said, more like on the background, not so much active. Why do you think it's like that? Because it would be perfect setting with all the history and all the bleakiness.
Lots of British people are more passive-aggressive than directly aggressive.
Yeah?
So maybe that's why.
So you don't have the strong anti-Christian mentality Norwegian, Swedes, Finnish people, etc. had when it comes to black metal, like I think churches and all.
I think we have less reason to feel directly that way. I mean, obviously, Christianity was not always there for anybody, but that sort of thing, it would feel disingenuous, I think, for any of us to really focus our creativity on that, because it just, frankly, it doesn't really have much impact on my own life. I was raised atheistic. It's just, it's not the top of my list of passions, to...
In the UK though,
it's just...
Like Christianity is the background noise in the UK. It's not a big dominant force or something. And I think it's been dwindling for a long time. But if you just think about some of the bigger things that have happened in metal and say the controversies that someone like Adam from Behemoth has gone through, and like
it's a Catholic country, so it's really
in Poland, it's completely different. So to come from that environment and be like anti-Christian is a way more kind of visceral and powerful thing. I think from the UK, if you're kind of anti-Christian, it's just like you're kind of anti the sort of background noise of the country. It doesn't really feel to have any like.
It
doesn't
seems
feel
like kind of like just putting on a hat because it's what they've seen elsewhere, and well, yeah, it just
Look at the amount of churches that are turned into trendy apartment blocks in the UK.
I mean,
or like carpet warehouses or like whatever. There's like that all this stuff like that. It's just sort of fading away really, and I don't think that it has any hold on people spiritually or emotionally really anymore. So
It's not really our battle.
it's not something to be against because it isn't really something that's a huge force in my mind.
So this silly comeback from me would be, so since black metal is often much like punk, anti-establishment and all, so you could go for against the queen and king and all that stuff, and would it work for you in that sense? Not so serious question, but in a way.
I mean,
don't really care that much.
yeah, no, absolutely no. Again, that's background noise. But the thing for Winterfylleth was always to have lyrics that tried to mean something, and so we based some of the lyrics on historical stories and kind of trying to bring the idea of those kind of ancient tales of battle or struggle or loss or victory through to the modern world. And I think that there's this overarching theme of trying to kind of tap into the social conditions of the world a bit and talk about that through how things used to be in the kind of old texts. So we've used lots of like old Saxon poetry. We've used some ancient writings from the kind of British Isles and beyond into the sort of lyrics that we're talking about. And so the story arc in a lot of that is kind of people are kind of the subjects of power struggles a lot. People that, are pawns in wars that go on, there's always something kind of going on behind the curtain. And so while we're not like anti-Christianity in a sense, I think there's always been this idea of sort of challenging what's going on in society a bit, or certainly trying to bring people's attention to what's going on in society a little bit. And I think that if we're anti anything, it's anti the kind of the mania that seems to exist in the world and all the sort of pressures and I don't know, that the cages that are put on people, just through everything that's happening in life. And so it's to kind of try and poke holes in some of that and make people think about it.
I already got the why when I was reading The Evolution of the Cult, a book by Dale Patterson, and there was this interview or article part of you, British black metal, and I get the feeling already from there that you're more of a philosophical band rather than this guns blazing, machine gun bands like some of the other bands are like focusing on wars and of course these topics about religions and all. So would you say Winterfylleth is thinking man's black metal band, if you can call it that?
I mean, no one would like to say that about themselves. I think we like to try and be thoughtful about what we're doing. But, on the other side of that, there's a fun side to us, and we're into all sorts of metal as a group of guys. And, I think if you were to like speak to Russ is a lot more rock and roll than some of us guys,
Maybe there's a little bit difference with the look and all.
So, not so longer anyway, you and I. No, yeah, I mean, I think with what Chris was saying, it's just important to us, and I think important in black metal generally that you should feel what you're saying, and it should be what matters to you. And if you, I do have a bit of a distaste for like the larger institutions of religious organizations, but I don't wake up in the morning and think like, damn, if only I could crush the church, I would, there's not, it wouldn't feel like what's in our hearts, our experience of life. And I think if you want to like use an extreme chord music or create evocative or atmospheric music, then it's only really going to go over if you are feeling what you're doing. It has to be genuine. So
That's the key thing for us. I think it's always had to be authentic. Music has to be to convey an authenticity, no matter the genre. But I think it's particularly important for black metal.
And I think going back to what you asked earlier, actually, about why maybe the UK has less significant black metal bands or less of a known black metal scene, I think it might have a lot to do with that because initially I think, well, a lot of bands out there, for better or worse, they enjoy the blueprints of, I don't know, second wave, Norway black metal, corpse paint, anti-Christian. So these bands might have tried this in the UK, but maybe it falls flat because it's not for real.
Yeah.
In that way. So
becomes a parody.
So I'm not it's blanket slating any of these bands or anything, but I think that it needed to find its own way to exist from from that place, you know, because like I know it's just different. So you don't want to be just copying what you've enjoyed, but you want to be doing something genuine. So it has to come from your lived experience of life, not just what you liked in music that influenced you, I guess.
All right. Now, coming back to you about the authentic parts and all that stuff, you mentioned it like there might be bands that are not real or authentic or that stuff. Like, do you feel there are bands that are actually just going for the trends and beat money, success, groupies, whatever there might be in the world of rock and roll and metal? Do you think there's a part of bands that are just in for some of these? Rather than
For sure, yeah. That I wouldn't like to.
You don't have to name anything. We're not looking for trouble for you guys, but
Yeah, there are definitely, like, just as like listeners of music and fans of music, particularly obviously black metal, I can only really fully become invested in a band if I get the sense that what they're doing is completely genuine and completely from the heart, and they really believe in what they're doing. And I think you can see through. You can see through a band if it is just a parody, and I've seen plenty of bands in.
Just people just want to
just like,
I think wanting to be your primary objective to we might call success or like popularity. I mean, obviously, like, a band wants to be heard, but if a band is only about that and all they care about is like achieving status, it almost always falls in its space, because that's why do that in black metal anyway?
So we come back to something. I mean, there's been, we've seen over the years the different trends of how bands portray themselves on stage and the kind of costumes they wear on stage, masks, cloaks, religious garb, and that's fine. If I'm sure there's plenty of authentic bands that do that thing.
So it's like for every new thing, there's a million others.
Yeah, for us, it was always important to, well, as Chris said earlier, to just kind of let the atmosphere and the music be the main focus, and to just basically, that's why we just dress in black on stage.
So you're more like vessels rather than a theatrics.
Yeah. And I realised that those visual aesthetics are an important aspect of black metal, but it still has to be authentic. It still has to be authentic, and there is so much of that kind of visual presentation that is completely inauthentic and just there.
Sometimes style over substance.
Yeah,
Kind of like a diversion even.
Yeah, I just don't think it needed to be for us. I don't feel like we would be genuine if we were putting corpse paint on and singing songs about the demise of the wilderness in in rural England or something like that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I get your point.
Industrialization of like rural England is a really important thing. Like where I live is a small rural town, and the villages around it are slowly becoming all encompassed into the town, and it's like this beautiful areas of English countryside are just getting swallowed up just to appease. Well, I know there's a housing crisis in England, but it's at the cost of the countryside, and that's a really sad thing for me.
Oh, all right, I understand. Now, I want to take it actually back to you, because you're not the big city boy man, like in terms when people think about it, like London being especially the kind of a core and heart of things in England, and everybody, of course, is thinking always to big cities. But the same thing really here in Norway when it's all about Bergen or Oslo. You're more rural in that sense. Does it reflect your music, like when it comes to, well, you kind of already mentioned it in the mindset and all, but also when it comes to the lyrics, do you think it affects you lyrically that you are not from these busy metropolitan areas and all?
Well, I mean, it inspires for sure. It's meant to be evocative of the land itself. That's, all the Winterfylleth album covers are landscapes of risen, and it's inspiration is taken directly from the natural beauty of the land. Yeah. So I think it's very much part of it.
And absolutely, I agree. And I think that Winterfylleth has always had this idea of like kind of timeless album covers with no sort of modern influence in them, no kind of modern buildings or modernity, and it being very much about the kind of purity and spirit of nature. There's a great track actually which we played yesterday, great themed track called Green Cathedral, which is about the idea that you don't need the kind of churches of man to find personal spirituality. And if you go up and stand on the top of a mountain and feel the wind in your face and look out across a huge, vast landscape and feel that kind of connection to nature, then the Green Cathedral, if you like, is the
it's a very good description,
yeah,
because you already get the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of take it in from nature. And so we tried to bring that in. Look, I mean, because we don't live in a city, like we always say that we're from Manchester because that's the second biggest city in the UK, and we live like around it. Yeah. So we rehearsed there and we kind of formed there. So there's still a big scene that we're connected to, but I think, you know, in terms of like the other side of it, you know, we've done other projects in the past. I used to play in a doom metal band called Atavis, which was much more about, you know, that kind of, like you were saying, the industrial areas. Like I'm from a place called Huddersfield originally, which is very close to Halifax, where My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost and all those guys are from, like 2 or 3 miles away. So I grew up in the same landscape as those guys. And so my first kind of successful band was doing something based around that kind of the overwhelming industrial nature of the city and the kind of absolutely the darkness and stuff. And so I think I kind of had expressed that already, or continue to express that in the music we make with that band. And so I've always felt that Winterfylleth should have a bit more of a helicopter view of society. We're sort of talking about some of the bigger things that are going on, whereas my other projects was much more about the individual in society. And I know that Russell, through like his other band and like other projects that Simon's been involved in as well, there's lots of different influences that have been talked about there. And I think, you know, it can be good to sort of diversify your ideas in bands, but I also think that I've always had this idea for Winterfylleth that it kind of is this sort of one overarching idea, and that we have the album covers look as they do, and there's a continuous sort of theme and aesthetic to the band because it conveys that spirit. And you know, if we were just to release a kind of, I don't know, some kind of like drawn nocturnus album cover, you know, with like a kind of like a cyber alien on it or something, it wouldn't be right for us. So I think, you know, we have to.
Yeah, I don't know what the cover you're referring to. Even early Paradise Lost was kind of a like weird sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly.
When you see sci-fi metal all around, like,
exactly. Yeah,
kind of like odd the world of, you know, corpses and burning churches, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's tackle the name. Why Winterfylleth? It's not really self-explanatory in the sense like it's not.
I think Simon actually came up with it originally.
Yeah, so the name Winterfylleth derives from the Old English language, and it roughly translates to mean winter full moon. And the Winterfylleth is a festival that was celebrated by the Anglo-Saxon people at the end of the harvest, so September, October time, gathering in all the crops from the fields to prepare for the onset of a cold winter. And the Winterfylleth was a big harvest festival which was marked by the first full moon of winter, which is traditionally in the middle of October. And they would have a big feast. Days around the full moon would be feasting, preparing for gathering in the crops and preparing your home for a warm winter. And that's literally what it means, winter full moon. And our first demo, which Chris and I made back in 2006, 2007, we actually released it on the winter full moon in October.
Quite a romantic takeaway.
Yeah. I think we had that idea originally. This is why some people have often mistaken our band name to mean October.
Yeah.
But I think if you surface level look at the word Winterfylleth, people get it wrong. It's the first full moon being arriving, which is often in October.
Yes.
But people just thought it just means October, and so they've got that wrong a bit. But you know, so
it relates to the full
it relates to this.
Now coming a little bit back to that, kind of a funny, and I don't know if this is funny, but kind of a weird way, is to, you know, how Norwegian bands, a lot of Viking bands especially, went do songs about like Viking raids and all that stuff. And now my mind is thinking, they went many times to England, even raid monasteries and all the stuff. And
true.
Basically, you should be like anti-Norway. Our history, fucking Norway, it's like fucking Vikings. Like, have you ever considered doing like the opposite version of the story,
well,
like being raided and fighting back those goddamn pagans?
I think the Saxons had a pretty good track record in fighting them back in England and
making York to York.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there was a few actually. There's a song called Brithnoth, the Battle of Malden. which is on our first album, and that's about the kind of men standing on the banks of a river and like fighting back I think it might be the Danes, that one, not the Norwegians, but yeah,
Vikings nonetheless.
Yeah.
Screw those Scandinavians.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. But I've talked about this a lot in interviews, so I won't like go into it in chapter and verse. But you tend to find, like, when you think as a non-native speaker of any Scandinavian language, it just has this evocative nature because of the characters in the letters and because of the way that it's talked about. And like, there's loads of bands that have used the mythology of the Scandinavian countries really well, but there's also loads of bands who've done it in a really kind of cartoonish kind of way.
Yeah.
And it becomes this real, like, kind of
Comes down to that inner.
yeah. It becomes a bit, it does a bit, and like, it's such a popular export outside of black metal. The whole kind of like the Viking culture or whatever you might call it. That it can be a bit of a, I don't know, something that is not that sincere. And so we were quite clear that we didn't maybe want to do the other side of that, like you suggest, because we felt that like there was quite an interesting and perhaps unknown history from the UK. Like, I don't think it gets taught a great deal in our schools and stuff, and it's not well known in the people. And I think
it does in more recent years, they have started to bring in, when we went to school, we're in our 40s now. When we went to school, there was never any stuff about Anglo-Saxon history in the curriculum that you're taught.
Oh, that's weird.
There's nothing about that. But I understand, certainly in English classes, my other half is an English teacher, and they teach Anglo-Saxon poetry at secondary school level now, which was never the case when we went to school. So that's a really good positive thing.
Something is improving.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, also thinking about these topics, because, well, history of UK is, say, this is like an understatement, but it's very colorful.
Yeah.
All the different kings and executions and princes and queens and all the fights with the French, with the Scottish people, with the Vikings and all that stuff. But I had this conversation with Saar a couple of days ago, like when he wants to do music. There's a strong Scottish presence, and of course, how half the Scottish people are all fucking England, and the other one is like, it's okay, it's okay. But like with the Vikings, have you ever considered, like, we could talk about these fights and wars with the Scottish people or with the French people? Like, let's go full Napoleon and all that stuff.
I think with that kind of thing, when you want to talk about the histories, it's not necessarily that you want to like take on like any sort of like grudges or like have any sort of stance on these events. That's not the case. I mean, like, integration and war and invasion, in Britain is a huge part, of history, and it's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I don't think you can say, like, oh, my country behaved like so great and all the others didn't. Like, that's
the flag of colonialism.
That is totally not the point at all. So it's not like we're sitting here going,
people may
like, fuck the Scandinavians for invading, back then. Like, there's just that's life. That's history. It's always been like this. And sort of right to, I think, how much do we write about wars anyway?
Well, I think it's interesting.
But it's just
to pick up on what Russell's saying, like that, there's obviously a really negative strain of our history where the people in power, who are not always the people of the nation,
exactly,
go and invade other countries and subjugate other people, and that's certainly not something that we want to necessarily be part of or celebrate. And certainly in the case of the Scots and the Irish, the way that the British government has subjugated those people over hundreds of years is pretty dark. It's not something that we're
it fundamentally doesn't work for anyone to either really be feel like responsible for like their national actions or like feel any sort of emotional response to other nations' actions, because like, you as an individual, like,
exactly.
It is your government representing you. That's a ridiculous way to look at this.
The people in power, they don't represent the people of a country, and that was one of the big things for us. Is we've always been made to feel as English people that we shouldn't be proud of our landscape or our culture because our nation has subjugated so many other nations. But it's not our culture or people that have done that. It's the people in power seeking riches or whatever. And there's a famous quote that we included in the liner notes of one of our records by He was actually the last surviving soldier from the First World War, a guy called Harry Patch, who came from an area near where I came from, and he lived into, I think it was 101 when he died, something like that. But he fought in World War One in the trenches, and none of us can imagine the horrors of being conscripted into the army to go and fight a war that you want nothing to do with, that your country shouldn't even be involved with in the first place. And he famously said that he believed the politicians should be given the guns and told to go and settle their differences for themselves. And that's always really resonated with us. And I think that's our overall outlook on things like that.
I think that the culture we're talking about is not the culture of the leadership. It's the culture of the people. You know, even though we're not folk black metal, there's been a vein of folk music and folklore that's kind of come through some of the music. And I think folk music and folklore is the art of the people, isn't it? And it's the art of the subjects rather than the kind of rulers. And I think it's their response to what's going on in their situation, and it's their way of passing on their knowledge or their experiences through to the next generation. And it's a sad state, really, because we probably find ourselves in that place now again, where a few generations since the war has occurred, and actually, it feels like the world is, a very kind of dangerous place at the moment, and we might be sort of tipping into another area where 2 or 3 generations have forgotten about the horrors of war, and we might be kind of heading back there, and our leadership feel very tense at the moment. And I again, that's nothing to do with the people who want to live their lives and take their children to school and
the
So I think we represent those people, not the dictatorial people at the top.
Isn't it really kind of funny and kind of ironic talking about this, that never the powers that be, they're never making the music and art.
No.
You don't see the prime ministers like, hey, let's form a band, let's start doing extreme metal. Mm-hmm. They don't pick the guitars, they just go like, I don't like that music, I don't like that art, I don't like that theatre, whatever.
Because often art, it goes against what they're saying, doesn't it? And it would be counterproductive for them to promote that stuff.
Yeah.
Certainly with a lot of the counterculture stuff that genres like black metal and its associated styles of music deal with, I think. Yeah.
Now, talking about this English thing that you mentioned, like colonialism and people being subjugated and all, I get the vibe from the various countries have different set of rules, how much you can go, say, national romantic with your thoughts. Say, you see certain bands like Talk is a good example, they can wave the Norwegian flag as a cloak and do that. Obviously, you can, because you would be...
Yeah. It's well, we got a lot of...
Yeah, exactly. And the same is actually for Finnish flags. So if you would put that, people would be like, oh, okay, these might be National Socialist. And we can't even go like, hey, but Swedes invaded us first. Yeah. Russia invaded them.
Yeah, Finland.
Yeah. Like we've been butt fucked twice.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But certain countries get a lot of leeway. If you just see Americans, they're always waving the flags back and forth, and nobody is saying like...
The culture around that is very different, just dependent on where you are.
It's actually, not to get too controversial here, but you can get, if you fly the national flag in your garden in the UK, not that I do this, but...
You mean Union Jack?
The Union Jack or the George Cross. The council can actually come and tell you to take it down.
Really?
Yeah, you can fly a flag of wherever else. It just doesn't affect.
There's this ingrained guilt or something like that goes on, and it's sad because I think for all the bad things that it represents, for some people, there's a whole amount of good people that sit below that who have got great things to add to culture and to life, and have got interesting opinions, and they're good people who just want to live good lives, and I think that it doesn't represent, that idea doesn't represent everyone.
I think it's fundamentally the short-sighted to feel either proud or ashamed of something that you did not do.
It's together like a guild of your grandfathers.
I think that's just a strange way of being. I've never really understood that. Whether it's guilt or pride, just like, oh well, I feel this way because I was born feeling that way. But it is no. Come on, this. Yeah. So I.
There is a...
Yeah, I don't feel that strongly about,
As Germans about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My connection with England or the UK. Like I don't feel that personally. Maybe it's because I don't see so many of them. It's not like a connection with the flag or like thing like this. It's really more of just
It's a connection.
personal thing. And it's not even the. I wouldn't even say that's about like England. Like it makes it sound like you writing as if like this is like the better place. It's not like that. It's more the connection that anyone feels wherever they're from. You would hope like to their home.
Yeah, that's exactly
That's what I mean.
It's a neat, innovative connection. So landscape,
But it's funny. It's funny.
It's really not necessarily like England is just like that's what
our perspective.
so so it's just like that really is all of his for that. And we know for example Andy in Sales, a friend of ours, or Mordial in Ireland, and these bands all doing this kind of thing.
Exactly.
And we're all great friends with these bands, and Primordial Sounds, for example, they sing about stuff.
Yeah. Alan is doing a lot of stuff with the
And
Irish.
when we love that guy, so it's not like when these things are discussed in the music, which is vitally emotive, as an Irish actor to be singing about those things and feeling passionate about it, like do I sit there and I feel like guilty? No, of course I don't. I sit there listening to Primordial and it's like, I'm with you. I feel moved by this,
Yeah.
It's really like that, like there's just nothing to.
I mean, you look at Primordial, what the Irish went through in the past few hundred years, and you listen to a track like The Coffin Ships, it literally can reduce you to tears, can't it? Just thinking about that.
Every time I hear that song,
It's just, and
so
seeing,
brilliant.
we've seen them perform it live in Dublin, and that's, honestly, to see them perform that live in Dublin, you can almost feel the pain of the Irish people. It's palpable.
Yeah.
In the venue. It's like, and you see like Alan breaking down into tears on stage singing that song. And that's
deep emotion.
authentic.
Yeah. You cannot fake that shit. Now, coming back a little bit more to the music before we end up and go on about Ventures. What kind of music? What kind of bands? If you want to go name dropping in terms of homage, what kind of bands inspire you these days to do the music?
I mean, originally when we formed the band, obviously there was all the classics and stuff. But as I mentioned before, like I think we all like all the sort of traditional stuff, the Dark Throne and Mayhem and all those kind of original core bands. But equally, we always enjoyed how bands say like Ulva or Enslaved or Primordial or like bands like Drug from the Ukraine, who had that a little bit more organic feel to what they're doing, and it's less about the kind of satanic, black, lo-fi, harsh sounding stuff, and it was more about the richer sort of folk themed stuff lyrically.
Landscape.
Yeah, like more landscapes than caves or caverns, like more, I don't know, mountaintops than graves, like that.
So more than hobbits than Saurons.
I think it's interesting actually because Chris mentioned black metal bands, but as I say, I mean, I'm a newer member in Winterfylleth, I should add. So, for me to talk about Winterfylleth's musical inspiration is a little different because I'm from a slightly different path in my life, but still, I mean, from my experience of being in Winterfylleth the last 4 or 5 years, the one genre we probably talk about the least among ourselves is actually black metal, and that's no disrespect, but I guess it's kind of a given between us that we're involved with this, and we don't discuss it so much, but we also have these unifying influences, like Iron Maiden, classic bands like this, Sabbath and stuff, and I actually think that in our sort of social chat, we're talking a lot more about classic metal between ourselves and death metal and things like this, or maybe things that are just a bit more exciting that we might wish to share with each other. I think because we operate in black metal,
Interesting.
you kind of
Like,
I'm not really thinking of many when I think of influences now. I mean, Winterfylleth has many albums anyway, and you start to just kind of feel your way in your own path, and it's less, about how it starts, and maybe you want it to sound like X and Y, but after a while, I think as a musician, you just learn that you have a way of expressing yourself, and
It comes naturally.
it's less about trying to sound like anyone at all.
we were influenced by a lot of British death metal bands as well. Like, we massive influence from bands like Bolt Thrower.
Oh man, big one.
I mean, incredible, legendary British death metal band. And you listen to the choruses in Winterfylleth, the drums are pure Bolt Thrower, mid-bass, double bass drums.
So when can we expect kind of a cenotaph intro?
Well, we've always talked about doing a Bolt Thrower cover, haven't we?
Yeah, we
I don't know if it really works. It's funny the way the influences creep you because it would just like surprise you.
I'd love to do
It'd be more like reference points, like let's use the drum fill from Whitney Houston Yeah. No, I will always love you.
Oh,
Yeah, that one. We got that one.
yeah.
That was my idea.
It's on the new record.
There is a new. Yeah.
I mean, that would be awesome because I think one of the problems with younger generation band is like they overlook the history. Like you mentioned Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden. A lot of bands I've interviewed over the years, they are not shying about like, yeah, we grew up with bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Slayer, whatever. And younger generation is like, what happened before the 90s or even 2000s? They're like, doesn't exist or doesn't matter. And I think it's like forgetting your history, the roots, and the heritage.
I really, like, I spent a lot of my listening time with, especially the last few years, like, going, like, early 80s, like, late 70s, like, the early Scorpions albums and stuff like this. I love rock and roll.
Just don't do the toxic cover, Virgin Killer. Don't go there.
No, I won't. Don't worry, it would never cross my mind to do something like that.
Now that it's in your mind, subconscious, like texting the guys, hey, I got a cover idea.
Landscapes. Always
Yeah,
landscapes. Much
Landscapes
easier
with,
to
oh no, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, you know, when it comes to influence, it's not like I say, oh, we're influenced by Winnie Houston. That's just me. But you know, when you ask me stuff,
Next album coming out.
Like, you know what you're kind of doing, and then, like, you know, it's the things that you will talk about, like, oh, hey, you know, maybe we should, like, do a kind of like lock up thing with the guitar and drums, and you know, we might say that sounds more like something like down. You know, if it's more left field, then you might talk about something to bring into the Winterfylleth sound. But like, if we actually sat there going like, well, yeah, we want this one to sound like a Drugka, then I don't know. That's kind of your ambition. Then is to do a very sort of carbon copy blueprint sort of thing. If we know we're making black metal, then that's a given. So influences that you might actually go like, it wouldn't be interesting if we tried an Iron Maiden style.
Weird. I mean, Paradise Lost had the Depeche Mode for you know, phase, and people were like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Yeah.
Coming from the Death Doom and suddenly going into that, and like, wow, that was a little weird.
But I just, I think that's more of a given, and it's more interesting for us to talk about the more diverse things. Like,
Talking about that kind of early English doom metal scene, like, well, you look at a band like Anathema.
Yeah, very different nowadays.
Very different. But do you know what? Anathema's sound, like, you listen to a like more recent Anathema, or even, well, Anathema since the late 90s, essentially.
Yeah.
And it still sounds like Anathema, doesn't it? It's still, they've got that atmosphere, and their identity of their sound still sounds like that on their later records.
Even though it's gentler indie and not Death Doom.
Yeah, it's not like the Serenades EP or whatever. Whatever. Let's play a little bit foretelling. What happens in, say, next 2-5 years even with Winterfylleth?
Well, as we sit here today, where are we? April now, are we?
Yeah, 1st of April. Now we're going to do April Fools. And
yeah.
So
not even mid-roll.
yeah. So we finished a new album a few weeks ago. So that's kind of going to be coming out for us, I think, at the end of the year, September maybe. And then we've obviously got the lead up to that, single releases and videos and stuff, and then we're hoping to do a tour at the end of the year, and then from there on I don't really know. Obviously we need to sort of spend a year or so kind of playing these new songs, learning these new songs, and kind of bringing them to people. I don't know if we ever think much further ahead than that, really, because you know, you do a record, you make a record, and you kind of go and take that to the people that like the music. I think we haven't got any ambitions at the moment, at least in my mind, of stopping or anything like that. So we'll kind of keep making records, and we'll keep touring as best we can.
so the typical cycle in a way.
It's been a long time this time. It's been 4 years since we did an album, which it doesn't feel like that long ago, but because of all the 2 years we had almost of like kind of the COVID and everything.
Yeah, it's just like add 2 years to everything.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about it.
We're a bit kind of out of sync with our normal way of doing things, but we had loads of material in this new album, and we've got some things that can kind of come after that. So we're ahead a little bit now, which I'm happy about.
There's a few nice surprises.
Yeah, there's a few nice surprises. Yeah,
And also, I mean, that's, you know, as far as like, you know, like you're making your plans for 5 years ago, I mean, like how much can you plan? But I mean, it shouldn't be understated.
More like dreaming, I guess, would be for the
It shouldn't be understated that like, the new record is cool. There were some things that were a little different for Winterfylleth. I mean, it's my first album with the band, and also the keyboard player Mark, who performed with us at Inferno. You know, he's been in the band for a while, but he's playing every show with us now, whereas he didn't used to. And so that's more present on the new record as well. So it's it's not an overhaul, but it's a more developed Winterfylleth sound on the record and live. So it's an exciting time for the band, and people should come and see it and buy the new album.
I agree.
All right. Now, final question before we really wrap things up. Is Winterfylleth more a live or studio band?
I think it's always been, for a bit of a cop-out answer, a bit of both.
Yeah, but gun pointed at your temple. Head.
I think live. I think live, yeah. We've always played a lot of shows. We like to play the right things. Don't like to do everything. We like to pick and choose what we do. So probably live. But if the cop-out answer is both.
Yeah. Of course. I think that's the kind of our default answer, because otherwise you wouldn't probably do it. Yeah.
We like to release an album, every 2 years.
Yeah.
This, as Chris said, this is a bit of an exception to the rule because of the pandemic. But since we started in 2006, we released an album almost exactly every 2 years. So this new album is album number 8.
Yeah.
But it's been 4 years for us.
So in the studio, our intentions aren't to be like hyper, like technical, or like super detailed, or like like my impression of what I would call a studio band. On an extreme might be like all necrophagist stuff, where like I was like super like clinical with his recording sessions or whatever. There's nothing like that. And I think when Winterfylleth records is trying to capture the energy that we have naturally when we play. So it's a live feeling thing. And pretty much what we're trying to capture in the album is just the sound of the keys, 2 guitars, drums. Wants to feel human energy. So I think definitely more of a live band, and I think we've been playing really great shows last year or so. Really great energy, and coming into our own more than before in the live arena. So I think definitely live band.
All right. Last questions. If you get to pick one song, and this is for the audience, excluding, of course, this coming album, what song should the audience start with their journey into Winterfylleth? Just one song.
This is an interesting perspective, because as Russ is someone who's only been in the band for like the last 5 years, he maybe had experience with the band before.
Yeah, that's why I want to have different opinions for everybody.
Look, my favourite Winterfylleth song, and I'm not saying that everybody should go this way, but I don't know what you're going to like, guys.
Just
my favourite Winterfylleth song is a song called Soul Unbound, which is kind of a slower, kind of a melancholy song, but I just always really liked it. And when I joined the band, I persuaded us to play it.
All right. What is your pick then?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because obviously we've got a lot of albums. I think there's certain fan favorites, if you will, that like.
That's not our favourites.
Yeah. Like our biggest song on like streaming platforms is a song called Ensigns of Victory, which we started playing because we thought people would like it, but actually we thought it was one of the least good songs on our record.
People shouting.
People were shouting it yesterday. So like, who knows what people will take? I think the songs that people should probably start with are tracks like A Valley Thick with Oaks.
That's one song.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right.
Picking your favorite child. I get it's annoying.
A Valley Thick. Two. A Valley Thick with Oaks or Whisper of the Elements, I think, are probably like the kind of.
Yeah.
What about you? What would you
I was going to say both of those songs. So Chris has said those two. So I'd say off our last album, the title track, The Reckoning Door.
Yes, good job.
All right.
Yeah.
Now,
Iron Maiden leads.
word to the wise of your younger version. If you could learn from your past, like this is like the go-to answer, or you can just give a tip to the someone in
wise.
Yeah.
Oh God.
There's someone making notes now. Some 15-year-old pimple-faced guy, like, I'm picking my first guitar or drum set, and what do you would tell this guy?
First, come back to me after these guys.
I thought about this before, and I think that in the modern world now, if you're trying to make a band and do well with a band, you can't just do some kind of half-assed thing. You have to have a really strong idea, a really strong aesthetic, and kind of don't listen to what other people say. Like, have tunnel vision. Like, if you think it's brilliant, then do the best you can to make it brilliant, and don't just put out an EP after 5 months or something like that. Make sure you've like worked on your songs and like think about it and like do an album, and you've got all the time in the world to get it together. So I would say don't just try and rush something out because you're excited about it. Like, think about what you're doing and have a really clear vision of it. And I think that way then people have got something to relate to rather than it just be another band that's come out on Bandcamp or Spotify that week. And,
Of which there are.
and there's so many every week. It's like thousands of releases
Yeah,
every
that's
week.
like a ridiculous. And
Yeah.
what about you? What would be your
What I say to my young self,
or someone out there trying their
just
band?
well, if you find something you love in your life, you should do it all the time. It doesn't matter, where that gets you, if other people like it. If you love something in the world, you should do it. That's what I did. And if I could tell myself anything, when I was younger, it'd just be to keep going. Just do what you want to do, and eventually, you will get the things that you want. And that's exactly what happened. So I think that anybody that loves anything in their life, they should just do it. And it doesn't matter if anyone else likes it. Just it's your duty to do what you're supposed to do. So
I often say, actually, similar to that, I say good things happen to good people. So
Yeah.
now it's your turn.
I would say just be authentic, be yourself, and don't worry what anyone else thinks about you.
Well,
Be yourself, be authentic.
good words to the wise. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Now you know at least a little bit more about Winterfylleth and their music, their inspiration, their style, and all that. Now, what you should do, dear audience, if you're still there, go check out the guys' music, and when you have the possibility to see them live, of course, do it. Seize the moment and enjoy. This is Inferno 2024, Rauta, Winterfylleth, and goodbye, stay metal. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
That was lengthy one.
Enjoyed that.
All right. I'll take the mics before you go, and then we'll take a quick photo of you guys for social media.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, thank you. Really good.
Thank you, glad you liked it. It was really, really rewarding.